Greetings to you. Thank you and welcome to watching my channel. My name is Shawn. I'm a Gen Xer in my 50s and I love to read books. Most of the books I enjoy reading usually are under the genres of fantasy, science fiction, and horror. Uh, I loved enjoying reading stories as and hearing stories when I was a young child. Uh, the biggest thing I found while growing up and reading those stories is that over time, obviously from 50 years ago to today, some of those stories have been changed to be less violent and such. Um, but even then, uh, you know, a lot of those stories had morals to them and lessons, life lessons to them. And those were things that shaped who I am today. A lot of the biggest books that I read when I was growing up was the Fables of Aesop, uh, the Brothers Grimm, and the most recent book that I've read is going to be The King in Yellow. And I really enjoyed this book a lot. And that's kind of what started me trying to make this video and start my channel as well. So, the things that have shaped me obviously as a kid was these books also opened me to music that was also under what would be almost kind of scary as a kid. So a lot of music that I listened to when I was a child was the hard rock. Van Halen was obviously a one, but also Alice Cooper, Ozzy Osbourne, Kiss, Poison, and Twisted Sister. Growing up in the 80s, they were, the glam rock, the heavy metal of that time. And even with their costumes that they wore during performances and stuff, it was almost kind of like a horror theme to them, especially Alice Cooper between his boa constrictor and his makeup and everything. So there was almost like an association with horror, the love of horror, along with metal bands of those eras. And so obviously they shaped who I am today. Of course, I love things that are spooky between stories and movies and everything. Even Halloween was my special favorite time of the year. I mean, people will decorate for 4th of July and Christmas and everything else, for holidays. But the holiday I focus on and I observe more is Halloween. And I love to decorate my house with Halloween decorations in the fall. And it's usually a when can I finally put them up kind of a deal when it comes to Halloween. Try not to put them up on the 4th of July, but I would love to. Um, I do have issues, personal issues that I deal with. My biggest issue is that I'm on the autism spectrum and I'm autistic. That was very difficult, obviously, growing up. Uh, Autism has become better understood over the decades. When I was a kid, the um, there wasn't, they considered me ADHD, hyperactive disorder, but it never really fit in. I'm a big introvert, and it's very difficult for me to talk to people directly. Um, I tend to be rather quiet and nervous when I'm talking to strangers, and I stutter, usually having a hard time finding the right word I want to use in a conversation. Um, you'll also notice while I'm filming this, uh, and I didn't, and it must be annoying for people is that because I'm autistic, it's hard for me to make eye contact. I'm very my eyes will dart around, which I hadn't really noticed until I recorded myself earlier. And I close my eyes when I speak sometimes, especially if I'm thinking. So I don't make eye contact, and that can be unnerving for people. That's been they feel like either I'm not paying attention to them or I'm disrespecting them by not taking what they're saying seriously as well. So it's been difficult, needless to say, growing up and having those issues, especially communicating with people. So I don't have many friends. The friends I do have, even in my 50s here, are still the friends I had when I was in middle and high school. So it's very difficult for me to talk to new people and make friends like that. I wish it was something that I could improve uh, in being able to talk to strangers. Um, uh, the other issue, despite having my strengths, my biggest weakness was probably reading comprehension and mispronunciation of words. Um, so, as in my youth and high school, I was reading this story where we were passing a book around and reading chapters in a group. Um, I kept saying Sweet Lodge, Sweet Lodge, Sweet Lodge. It was like, it wasn't until the third time I came across the words that I realized it was supposed to be Sweat Lodge. And so there is those issues that I've dealt with growing up and trying to read that has made it difficult. That still didn't take away from my enjoyment of reading books. It just uh, felt embarrassing when I spoke out loud, especially reading. So um, even in my age here, I want to improve myself. Uh, some of the comes with this channel is that I'm in my own special world and I'm talking to you through a camera or a video recording. So in some ways I feel less nervous. There's not a face I'm looking at while I'm talking and reading. So that does help me a little bit. Hopefully it'll let me stay on focus while I'm talking. Even now as I'm speaking, I have a little cue card underneath my camera here that I'm using in order to try to stay focused. So I'm not going off on a tangent where I would be distracted and get off base here. So I'm hoping along with this channel, I can build my confidence up with continuing to read. And also that, of course, practice makes perfect. I am not a perfect person. And so obviously, reading like this, I'm hoping will improve both my storytelling and reading comprehension. So, um, why am I making this channel and why am I doing this? The biggest thing I've noticed with YouTube is that there's a lot of AI narrative now with storytelling, and it's very distracting for a lot of people, especially myself. The biggest thing is, even with my own issues with reading comprehension, the AI still is always mispronunciating words because some words are spelled the same but have different meanings, like record and record and such. And when I hear those mistakes, especially when I'm listening to some storytelling, it's almost like nails on a chalkboard for me. It's very distracting from the storytelling. So I'm hoping, obviously, me as a real person, I can improve on that experience for people that want to tune into my channel and actually hopefully not hear that AI voice, you know. Um, also, um, when I'm using this channel, for the most part, I'm going to be using, hardcover books or physical media, versus digital. There's nothing wrong with digital, and I'm not against it. Uh, Obviously, in a tablet, you could have hundreds of books in a tablet and access those books, and even you know closing it and opening it, you can come back to the same page without a bookmark. So I'm not saying that digital media is a bad thing. However, when you actually hold a book in your hand and you're reading from it, it's kind of grounding. Um, and I do love hardcover books versus a softcover book. My mom has a book of Huckleberry Finn that's over 100 years old, and it's in pretty good shape. It's got a small tear on the jacket cover, but for a 100-year-old book, I mean, the spine is intact and such, and it's really special. And I don't want us to lose that as we continue to grow in the digital age. There is something special about holding a book in your hands that's very grounding for being able to read that, and enjoy it as well. Um, the other things that I'm hoping is that with me telling these stories, uh, I I'm hoping to hear reflections. Obviously, a narrative on an AI voice doesn't get the reflections of a storytelling that you would hear normally in a story person telling the story. Also, the biggest thing that with this channel, I mean, obviously, there's a ton of books on audio, and those are good, and I enjoy audiobooks as well. However, a video, especially channel like I'm doing here, I want to make and grow an atmosphere with my storytelling. Uh, Especially when it comes to horror. When you hear horror, you want a spooky atmosphere. You just don't want to listen to somebody talk. There's that enjoyment of visual information along with the storytelling that some people, especially myself, enjoy, and it adds to the flavor of that book as well. Um, for my channel content, obviously, the name of my channel is Horror by Candlelight. There is, when it comes to horror, having the low lights of candles or even a flashlight under the bed covers or a campfire outside, those telling ghost stories around a fire, I mean, that's was a staple growing up, especially in like scouts when I was a kid. That it's adds to the flavor, of that storytelling. And even if the ghost story was lame, still, if you set it by a campfire, it made it, 20 times percent more spookier, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this channel, is not just the reading, but also the atmosphere for that story as well. Um, so I obviously have a passion for horror. Growing up in the 80s, was the kind of the birth of a lot of horror genre. So from Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and Friday the 13th, those were just awesome as a kid. And even if you were too young that you weren't supposed to be watching it, you still snuck a peek onto the TV as somebody else was watching it. And it was always that kind of forbidden horror, genre to scare you and give you nightmares when you go to bed. Um, the other, movies that I watched at that time, one of them was Silver Bullet. And so that was a werewolf movie. And when I researched that, I was surprised to find out that that was actually a book written by Stephen King. And Stephen King is just the king of nightmares and horror. And I mean, how many of his books have been made into movies, from Pet Cemetery and It and Christine and Cujo? I mean, how many? I mean, his storytelling in horror is almost a staple for your average horror fan these days. And so those were, so when I was growing up, I read so many Stephen King books, but also, um, between the Brothers Grimm and Aesop, and there were other fairy tales and nursery rhymes that when I grew up, it's funny because that seems to have been lost, those fairy tales and nursery rhymes, from when to today's generation of kids. And I feel that's really kind of sad. Now, there was some violence, and like, man, I remember reading or saying the story of little rabbit Foo Foo hopping through the forest, and my favorite part of that whole storytelling was scooping up the field mice and bopping them on the head. Well, now that's violent, so now we don't teach that song anymore, but it was fun and interactive, and as a kid, that was so much fun, to bop those field mice, and a lot of those stories have morals, you know, and that if you listen to the story, there is a moral to that story. And so now sometimes, especially when it comes to the Brothers Grimm, sometimes there is no moral. Sometimes the protagonist dies, which is kind of unusual for American storytelling, And so the thing is that, growing up, Disney has taken a lot of these stories and have pasteurized them to be more kid friendly. And so, you know, it's kind of funny now that when you look at, the the fairy tales that they've adapted, nobody talks about the reality of those stories and what was the original story. So, like Cinderella, I mean, they don't talk about the fact that the stepsisters, used a carving knife and butchered their feet in order to get their foot into the slipper. And of course, Ariel, from The Little Mermaid, she didn't marry the prince. She ended up, turning into sea foam and washing away. And so sometimes these stories are kind of gruesome, which, for kids that, listen to them, obviously they're inspired, but the reality of those stories have been twisted with the happy ending that Disney always provides with their cartoons. Nobody wants to go to the Disney movie where, Cinderella, you know doesn't get the prince, and all of her stepsisters and evil, wicked stepmother isn't punished in some way, but not gruesomely, So, I think as I've grown older, a lot of these stories now I can view, especially the original stories that I have now on book form, where I can read the original stories and I can enjoy them. And it's interesting how that original story, compared to today's, has changed, the meaning of those stories as well. So I want to bring that to the forefront of my channel as well. How the history of those stories, and of course, who doesn't like a thrill, and telling horror stories, and but I want to go a little bit deeper into those stories as well, and the understanding of the author, and the content of their books. Obviously, Stephen King is the horror king today, but the people before him, such as H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, these were people that, inspired today's generations. And so the interesting thing about that I found out with this book, The King in Yellow, it was written by an author named Robert W. Chambers. Well, what was interesting was that this story is what inspired H.P. Lovecraft. So who inspired our today's authors? Who inspired Stephen King to be the horror king he is today? And how many stories he's written, and the creativity and the imagination of his storytelling too. That's something that I want to dig deeper into at the beginning, to people to understand who these authors and publishers are as well. Um, so I want to finish up here with this video. I just want to say that, first of all, I'm not a professional. I've never taken any voice acting, classes, and I've got a very limited budget. The funny thing about that, though, is that sometimes the best horror is got the slimmest margin of uh, budgets. And you can look at like Friday the 13th, and when they started investing, $80 million into a budget, that movie stunk, or that movie stunk compared to the original Nightmare, the first Friday the 13th that was shot on a budget of, a couple tens of thousands of dollars. So sometimes that gritty, kind of bad, kind of um, staticky look to a video, like the Blair Witch Project and stuff like that. That actually adds to the horror of that movie, because it's like low quality feed. That actually makes that video in that movie more enjoyable. More suspenseful. So. Obviously, with this channel, I'm hoping to improve not only my storytelling, but also, even my equipment. So, like right now, I'm using my camera on my cell phone to video record this. And I got a good camera, on my cell phone. So it's not like I'm totally off. But, maybe if this channel grows, I can invest more into better equipment, better sound system and such. Um, um, I'm also looking to expand this channel as well. The biggest thing is I don't want to make a profit. So I'm not going to put ads on any of my videos on YouTube. This is more for my enjoyment and hopefully your enjoyment as well. I don't want to try to monetize other people's works as my own. I want to make the love of these books from me to you. And I'm hoping that with me sharing these stories with you, it's not just enjoyable, but hopefully it will make you, as much as I want to look up more horror, that it gives you that same passion as well. I'm always looking for feedback. Like I said, with my autism, I know that it's going to be kind of weird. I'm hoping that with a book in my hand and not having the nerves of being in front of an audience, that it can help improve my storytelling. But I'm always looking for feedback, and I know there's going to be internet trolls. I'm old enough now that I've grown up with, the internet, that there's going to be people that are going to hate just because they hate. So, but I'm looking for constructive criticism, of course, as well, from anybody who can offer it. Things with lighting or even setting, I'm hoping, obviously I will improve as the channel grows. You also might hear or see my animals. I do have a cat. His name is Otis. And I do have indoor chickens as well. I'm hoping to record these videos in the evening when my chickens have gone to sleep. But Otis is a cat, and cats are going to cat, and he's going to introduce himself sometime during a video. That's going to be inevitable. So if you happen to see Otis running around while I'm retelling a story, feel free to say hi to him. So nothing of there. So in ending up here, I just want to thank you for your time in listening to me. And I hope that I can get your continued support with my channel. And hopefully watch it as it grows in the future. But we're always got to start small somewhere, right? So, all right. Thank you very much. And now a word from our sponsor.